Breaking news. At 3:15 this morning, a woman was spotted attempting to commit arson on her own wooden build. Police on the scene reported the suspect deliberately setting fire to what they described as a complete monstrosity of a build. When taken into custody, the visibly deranged individual claimed, quote, "The wheel made me do it." No further explanation was given. The individual is expected to be admitted to an institute for the clinically perfectionist. More at 6. Hello, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to my build. I don't know why I keep gravitating towards news reports. Maybe I just view myself as a master criminal pulling off these absolutely ridiculous builds day after day. Today's block, though, was definitely not a success. The wheel gave me only wood types, and this was a lot harder than I thought it would be. At first, I thought it would be something that I could celebrate. Yay, a finally easy pick. But the more you worked with it, the more you realized how much you actually relied on non-wood type blocks. So this became an absolute disaster that really just made me want to set it on fire. So it was very cathartic to do the opening scene. Now, with that being said, if you do enjoy these opening scenes, make sure to let me know down in the comments below, as I have a lot of fun doing just stupid things every now and then, and I really like to know if you guys also enjoy a little bit of chaos in these builds. Now, I am also playing around with my mic setup, so also let me know if this is better or preferable to the other videos that I've done in the past. Now, this build went through multiple iterations. I just really was struggling with it for some reason. I was thinking of doing a monochromatic house, and I really underestimated how difficult this would be using only wooden blocks, because you never realize how different the log textures are from the plank textures until you're trying to add any sort of detail to a build like this. It was a nightmare. Mojang needs to fix their colors, pretty please, because holy crap, this was so difficult and it should have been so easy. Now, the build you're seeing currently is one that I completely removed in the end. I didn't like how it was coming together, and while the overall shape ended up working probably better than the structure that I had in place, it just wasn't feeling like it was working very well. So I tore it down and I just decided to build up something a little bit more simplistic and try and work on the main foundation before I got a little bit too carried away with the details. Now, I know a lot of people really do like wood as their main building proponent, but I feel like we all end up using some stone at some points in our build. So having the limitation that I could only use wood really put a damper on what I could build creatively, and it made me realize how reliant I was on other blocks and textures to make a build seem more lively and detailed. Now, I was using a reference of a monochromatic house that I'd found on Pinterest. It was just a concept art sketch, but I found when I was actually putting it into Minecraft, the monochromatic really did not work. The roof tended to blend in a little bit too much into the walls, so I needed to go with a differing color for the roof as opposed to the walls. But then that ran into the problem of a lot of the plank and wood types that we have aren't really complementary colors of each other. They're all beautiful and they're all vibrant in their own right, but when you try to add them as a color that's similar but not quite so, they end up conflicting and they come out as two different colors of two different families, and it's very hard to find something that has any sort of cohesion in the wood that you have currently. Now, I feel bad for this build because I think the overall bones and structure of it could have worked out really well had I been able to use any other blocks than the ones that I was confined to. I think it had some really good elements that I could have pulled more had I had more variation, but in the end it ended up turning pretty lackluster, and it wasn't something that I was at all proud of. Like right here, for example, I used mud walls as a little bit of a variation to get some fence height, and then I realized halfway through that I couldn't do that. That wasn't a wood type. So I had to remove them and sacrifice that little deviation in the gates and the little bit of visual interest that I was getting from them. Now, I did try to give this build my best effort, but I really at this point was starting to struggle with the constraints. I don't think I could have gotten it any better had it not been for the shelf blocks that really ended up carrying a lot of the minor details that I couldn't add elsewhere. And then right here, you're seeing me try to add a little bit of texture detail before realizing that the stripped cherry logs are a completely different color to the planks. I don't know why Mojang thought that this was a good idea, but the only ones that I could find of a similar color to the planks was things like wool and terracotta, so that was completely out of the way. I had to keep it as this basic, flat textured wall. And if you guys know me and my builds at all, that was an absolute pain to my builder's heart. I love adding texture where it really isn't needed, and not being able to do that was an absolute heartache. Now, these poor windows were trying to save the day. I was trying to add these like shutter-like elements, but it made it seem a little bit too dominating. So I had to stick with just the basic roof over the windows, and they were trying to make the build seem a bit more appealing, but I think at this point it was just too far gone. I think you can definitely tell at this point I was running out of care and patience for this build. It wasn't going in the direction that I wanted it to. I had been staring at it for quite a few hours at this point, and it just wasn't coming together the way that I really hoped it would. So I was getting a bit lackluster with a lot of the elements that I was adding in the details. I just felt like nothing could make it look better, and it was just like adding embellishments on a turd, so to speak. Now, I'm not going to bore you guys with the basic details on the outside. This build really wasn't one of my most perfect, so we're just going to skip straight to the flyover. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I know this build isn't the best that I have produced, and it definitely was quite a headache to make, but I still hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope you stuck around this long for it. With that being said, I'll see you in tomorrow's episode. Bye bye.